Hello and aloha, and welcome to History 241 Civilizations of Asia, session 26, which is a sort of review of the Asian civilizations from about 2000 BC to 1300 AD. First of all, my name is Karim Khan. Please go to WebCT and note down my email address, the latest one, as well as the phone number. And if you have any question, please contact me as soon as you can, and I would get back to you as soon as I can. This is the last session and the end of the whole semester, and hopefully pretty soon you would be taking care of the final exam or whatever is going to come your way. So for that reason, please check WebCT constantly and see if there are any new assignments or developments related to this course. So we're coming to the end of it, and let's see what we did throughout the 25 session, the whole semester. Okay, Asia. So we start with the Asian geographical regions. As you know, Asia being on the right, this part of the world, Asia. And let's break it down into different, pieces or regions of Asia. South Asia in yellow, and there's another color of East Asia, and then Southeast Asia, and there it is, the Central Asia. And so these were the four major geographical regions of Asia, and each one having its own character. A lot of languages, different types of ethnic groups, different type of races, different religions, each one dominated by a particular religion or philosophy. So there's a lot of diversity in that one Asia. And so next time when you think of Asia, do not think primarily of East Asia, which is China, Korea, and Japan. Asia is a huge, big continent. So as you see it, on the geography and then the different regions of Asia. Let's see further. Staying with the Asian geographical regions, the most important phenomena is, at least in East Asia and Southeast Asia, as well as in South Asia, the most important geographical phenomena is the monsoon system, the monsoon rains, which are triggered by the hard deserts of Central Asia, and it is this monsoon system rain that gives Asia the bumper crops of wheat and rice. Wheat in the north and rice much more in the south. Let's see the monsoon system. There is the hot desert getting hotter and attracting the colder and waterful winds, and these winds, the monsoon winds, bring moisture and rain to South Asia and Southeast Asia and East Asia. Then in the winter, it cools down, and then the colder air, it goes towards the ocean, and the ocean hot air goes towards the desert, and then it again brings the rain. So that's what happens. That it becomes colder in the winter, and the colder wind goes to the ocean, and that gives opportunity to the hotter wind of the ocean to come again and bring again monsoon. So that's the simplified form of how monsoon works. It's a complex phenomenon, but I hope we made the point how it works. Okay. Based on the monsoon, the great rich soil of Asia, it produced bumper crops, as I said, and of course the more you have food, the more you're going to have people and population, and hence Asia being characterized by the enormous population, especially of China and India. And also, all this population, wherever they are, they have the strong family and social networks. That is another major character of the Asian civilizations or Asian cultures, which is not only just the monsoon or the rich agriculture and the bumper crops, but at the same time bringing humanity together and getting them involved in the agriculture production. So there, the family values, come out in and expressed in the agricultural activity of Asia, or especially monsoon Asia. And so hence the nature, the population and the family coming into that cycle of agriculture and society. So it's very agrarian society, and still it is, with all these industrialization in Japan and China and Southeast Asia as well as in South Asia, but still Asia is fundamentally primarily an agricultural society as compared to the European industrial society. Okay, let's see further. The early human beings in Asia, quite early on, 1.5 million years ago, you have Java man and Peking man, and these were Homo erectus, if not completely Homo sapien. And then from about 1 million to 25,000 years BC, what you have, the Paleolithic or the Old Stone Age, which is roughly the same period, which is over the whole world. The same thing in Africa, the same thing in the Middle East, later on, of course, in Europe. But very early on, you have the Paleolithic or the Old Stone Age rising in Asia. From about 10,000 to 5,000 BC, it's a long transition to the Neolithic age, but reaching around the 5,000 BC, there you see the rise of agriculture. Pretty much, in Southeast Asia especially, and then also in South and East Asia. So the rise of agriculture as early as 5,000 BC, and with the rise of that agriculture, then you see the settlements, the Neolithic settlements, rising up, and those Neolithic settlements becoming villages, very humble villages, primarily engaged in agricultural activity. And then from villages, of course, you see the rise of towns and commerce, further on beyond 5,000 BC. So let's see further. The first civilization that started in Asia was the Indus Valley Civilization, as early as 2300 BC, and it lasted up to 1500 BC. A very mysterious civilization that it was. It started on the banks of River Indus, which used to be in northwestern India. But after that, northwestern India in 1947 became Pakistan. So that's why, that River Indus and the whole civilization is now in the home of Pakistan, or Pakistan is home to the Indus Valley Civilization. So from about 2300 to 1500 BC, what you see is the rise of this Indus Valley Civilization, which was the first civilization in Asia. And very, agricultural, of course, but very also very commercial. So both the agriculture villages and the commercial town you see between 2300 and 1500 BC in the Indus Valley Civilization. There is the Indus River, accompanied by other rivers, 4 rivers, and they still flow, as they used to be centuries, years before Christ. I mean, they still are there, and also they produce bumper crops, in India as well as in Pakistan. The whole this province in Pakistan, Punjab, as well as part of India, it literally means the term Punjab, the state of Punjab, meaning the land of the 5 rivers. And these are, the 5 rivers that flow and create bumper crops and villages and towns and life. For 1,000 and 1,000 years they sustained, just like any major other river, like the Nile River in Egypt, or for that reason the Mesopotamian rivers, ancient Iraq, rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, or the Chinese 2 great rivers, the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. So did the Indus River. But in Asia, Indus River was the first to produce a major civilization there that goes under the name of Indus Valley Civilization. Let's see. So that civilization, very sophisticated, compared to a lot of other civilizations, and sophisticated in the sense because of its cities. Unbelievable, those cities laid under a grid plan, which is very simple but very methodic. And even today, we see the rise of cities haphazardly throughout, the world. And so, but this one was very methodical. Unbelievable, the first use of brick, fire-baked bricks were used to construct homes. Again, very beautiful, very magnificent. Also, the first of its kinds to have underground sewers. Unbelievable, never anywhere in the history of the world. And even today, there are cities, and towns in different parts of the world with open sewers and things. And so this one was underground sewer that they used. Also, unfortunately, the Indus script, the writing system, still it's not decoded yet. And so there are experts that are working on it, to decode the script and see what were the beliefs of these people, the Indus people. And that's why the whole civilization and their belief and their politics, are shrouded in the mystery of this script. So as long as the script is not decoded, we would not know, how this civilization started and how did it come so abruptly to an end. That's another mystery about it. So we don't know what really happened to it. Most people believe that the group of Aryans that we talk about, when they came in 1500 to India from outside, there they killed this civilization, which really does not explain, the massive destruction of this civilization just by a limited number of group of people, the Aryans coming from outside. So this is still a mystery. So unless we have the script decoded, we would not know, especially the belief system. They do seem to be very sort of religious people, and yet we don't know much about them because of the script. So it's very important to decode the script. And as I said, previously, you could get, who knows, a Nobel Prize for decoding it. Let's see. The Indo-Aryan Civilization after the Indus Valley, and the origins of the Aryan people between Ukraine and Iran. That is believed to be like the original homeland of the Aryan people, and especially to the northwestern part of Iran. Iran, which in Bible and ancient time was known as Persia. This Iran, the term Iran literally means the homeland of the Aryan people or the Aryan people. These are very ancient people, but unfortunately, in 1930s, the Hitler and his gang, the Nazis in Germany, they adopted Aryan philosophy and Aryan supremacy type of stuff, and swastika, which belonged to the Aryan people. And a lot of Indian people, they did not like it, but they couldn't do anything about it. What can you do? Somebody, using your symbols. And so that's what they did. So do not confuse these Aryan people with, the one that lunatics we had in Germany, who were full of hatred for everybody. That's not what these Aryans were about. But they used them anyway. The Nazis used them. Let's see. So in between, from about 1500 BC, the Aryan people, they started coming to India. In much more by way of invasions, and by 200 BC, they had settled down, and they had, mostly they had conquered the Indus Valley civilization. In fact, they went beyond Indus Valley civilization, further east into India, the Aryan group of people. There, they founded what is usually referred to as the Aryan society, a very dynamic society, very different type of a society. Compared to the Dravidian, the local native people of India, it was very different, the society of the Aryans. A main theme in the Aryan society was the Hindu caste system in India, that the Aryan people instituted inside India. How much the Aryan really practiced the caste system when they were outside India, we don't know. because these people did not write about themselves, sort of illiterate people at that time when they lived outside India. It is only when they came inside India, then they started developing their religion, their philosophy, their books, and by 200 BC, they had almost everything in place: the Hindu religion, the Hindu society, the caste system that it was, as well as the scripts, the scriptures, the holy books that it had. So that's why it was only when they came to India, they started expressing themselves in writing and created their own script. Before that, they didn't have any script, so that's why we don't know much about them. But anyway, it was in India that they created what's called the caste system, and much more related to the Hindu religion. That was the Aryan religion. All right. Now we can talk about the Indian civilization, which was primarily a Hindu civilization. And in India, this is much more northern India. So from the northeast stretching towards northwest, which is present-day Pakistan, and certain parts of Afghanistan were included in the northern part of India. And it was in this area that you see the rise and fall of different very powerful Hindu kingdoms, especially in the east, which is now Bengal, and its capital Kolkata, which is the modern day capital, but it was not so much a historical in the historical past a city, but still, just to give you a reference, geographical reference, we use Kolkata, which is the capital of Eastern Bengal. All right, Western Bengal, sorry, which is the state of India. So not to be confused with Bangladesh. So here, a very powerful, Hindu kingdoms rising and falling in the Ganges Delta. Also, in the other side, much more in the northwestern part of India, you see the rise of republics in the river Indus, basin, and based on the river Indus system. So there, what you have is, number one, this one in eastern India, you have very powerful kingdoms based in the Ganges Delta. And in the northwest, you have very powerful republics based on the river Indus. Both river, in fact, sort of developed these powerful institutions, the kingdoms in the east and the republics in the west, northwestern part of India. Very powerful. They produce different kings. They produce different, systems of politics and bumper crops on top of it, and the population, going more and more into the rising more and more. Keep in mind one thing, especially in the Republican part of India, so to speak, in the northwestern part of India. There, you would have much more foreign influences, because northwestern India was open to the influences from Persia, the influences from Arabia, as well as from Turkey and other, even Chinese influences. So that's why the Republican part of India, the northwestern part of India, attracted foreign influences that later on would become, a major feature of the Indian society, Indian politics, and Indian history. Let's see some of those. One great foreign influence was, of course, Alexander the Great, who invaded India in between 327 to 325 BC, very young man. When he died, he was, the age of about 30 or 33. So the coming of the Greeks, in a way, would start the coming of other foreigners into India, and mostly from northwestern part. Most of invasions upon India came from northwestern part of India, which is present-day Pakistan and Afghanistan, and especially through the Khyber Pass. All right. Let's see how Alexander came there from Macedonia into Iran, into present, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and into India, and going into right here, starting, in fact, stopping in present-day Pakistan. So here is Macedonia, coming into Anatolia and modern-day Turkey, and then going into Persia right here, and entering into Afghanistan, and then into Pakistan, which used to be northwestern India. And that's how, it's a long road, and think of all these great, Greeks coming and invading India from a long distance, from Macedonia. Okay, so that would bring a lot of Greek influences to northwestern India, which is present-day Pakistan. Let's see further what we have. Okay, then a native empire rising in India under the great leadership of Ashoka, which empire was the Mauryan dynasty, or the Mauryan Empire, and its greatest son, Ashoka, who ruled India from about 272 BC to 232 BC, about 200 years before Christ, he ruled India. A great, wonderful person, basically primarily Hindu, but he converted to Buddhism. This should have been Buddhism, not Hinduism. I'm sorry, that was my mistake, but you should note it down. This should be converted to Buddhism, not Hinduism. He was originally Hindu. So after one major fight or battle in which he killed thousands and thousands of people, he converted from Hinduism into Buddhism. You should note that down. It's not, I cannot do anything about it right now, but erase that Hinduism and write Buddhism. Okay, so after converting to Buddhism, he adopted a moral law that goes under the title or name of Dharma. And that Dharma in which he insisted on unifying the people, bringing them together. Also, he, when we say unifying people, it also means bringing different castes together. So he sort of decreased the class or the caste tension in the predominantly Hindu society of India. Also insisting on that people should show generosity to other people. Whatever you have, you share it with other people, and especially those people who had wealth, land, power, they should be generous with other people. And top of that, tolerance to other beliefs or of other beliefs. He himself being converted, from Hinduism to Buddhism. He knew the two religions, very well. He also noted the differences between the two, but for him, he would not discriminate, the previous people, the Hindus that he belonged to. And so that's how he wanted everybody, that if he could convert from Hinduism to Buddhism, people should also be very open, to other religions. And so at that time, other religions in India could be, especially in the northwestern part of India, could be Zoroastrians, the Persian religions. But even inside India, if there were other religions still lingering on from the Indus Valley civilization, or still lingering on or existing among the Dravidian people, the local native people, then he wanted other people, if you are a Hindu or a Buddhist or whoever you are, you should be tolerant of other religions and other people, and do not discriminate or do not wipe them just because they have religious differences with you. So if you ask me, for those times, think about it too, 100 years before Christ, that was a very advanced philosophy that this young man, Ashoka, a great leader of India, brought to the table, and insisted on it, that people should be generous, tolerant, and good to other people. Okay, let's see. After the Mauryan Empire, you get quite a few Indian republics stretching from about 100 BC to 600 AD. especially the foreigners, the Greco-Bactrian Kushan Empire. This was a Greek empire and sort of northeastern Afghanistan, Bactria, based there, and it created what is called the Kushan family or the Kushan people, the Kushan Empire. And their greatest leader, just like Kanishka was to the Maurya, here, as Ashoka was to the Mauryan, the previous king, Kanishka was to the Kushan Empire, another great person. To be followed by the Gupta Empire, and it was instituted or established by Chandragupta. We talked quite in details about him in its own session when we talked about the Gupta Empire. So what you see here in India, very powerful families coming into being. And the power, of course, was based on land. The power was based on the bumper crops, either of the Ganges Delta or the Indus River. So power based on land and agriculture, bumper crops. And now as we get to the 1st century after Christ, the rise of trade and business between Eastern India and Western India, and between Western India and further west with Persia and Middle East, and even beyond that, even with the Eastern Mediterranean European people also, like the Greeks. So you would see from now onward the rise of very powerful empires as well as very powerful kings, rulers that would define the empire and the age that they lived in. So was, as I said, was Ashoka. There then you have Kanishka, another one Chandragupta, and let's see, the last of the great emperors or men who ruled India was King Harsha, who ruled from about 607 to 647 AD after Christ. And he also, sort of characterized his own age. King Harsha, known for a lot of bumper crops, a lot of wealth, fighting also, of course, that went with it, but more than that, buildings, the rise of buildings, art and architecture under King Harsha. All right. It was during this period that the Indo-Chinese Buddhist context increased. What it is, as you know, that Buddhism was born in northern India. It was an Indian religion. However, at one point or another point, persecuted by Hinduism, so it left eastern India and started going towards Western India, and from Western India it entered into Central Asia and China, and from there it would go to Korea and Japan. So it was during this period from about 500 after Christ, you see the spread of Buddhism out of India into modern day Afghanistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Central Asia, and then into China. And that's where it started during King Harsha, more more Chinese coming to India and learning Buddhism, and the Indian Buddhists going out of India and to other places and spreading Buddhism. So this was good for Buddhism, that it spread mostly in Asia, thanks to this peaceful time that King Harsha provided to the people of India and the Indian republics. Let's see. The Delhi Sultanate, the next major period in the history of India is the Delhi Sultanate, which is characterized, of course, by the Muslim rule in India. So Delhi Sultanate was primarily the Muslims' rule in India, and it started in the southwestern part of India, but the southwestern part of India was much more under the Arab influence all along. But now the Arabs were Muslims, and they were coming to India and establishing their rule in India, especially under the leadership of a person by the name Muhammad ibn Qasim, or Muhammad Qasim, who died around 715 AD. He came to India in about 711 AD, and he stayed there for some time. Later on, he left India for political reasons. He was recalled, so to speak, to Arabia and to the Middle East, and there he was assassinated or killed So it's a very politically disturbed time for him, and so that's how this young man, very young man, lost his life due to the political complexity of those times between India and the Middle East. But he was the first one to come to India in a sort of bringing an invasion to India and conquering southwestern part of India, which is present, like the southern part of Pakistan these days. Multan and the Karachi or the Sindh area in Pakistan was under his control. But that the Arab rule in southwestern part of India or modern Pakistan very short-lived. Although they did spread Islam, they brought people to Islam, but it was very short-lived. But the more permanent type of Islam that came was from the northwestern part of India, and let's see that one, which was in fact brought by the Turkish people and Afghan Muslim leaders from the northwest. And so that was the more permanent Islamic feature of India. And the greatest person of that time, although very controversial, was Mahmud Ghazna. Ghazna or Ghazni, it is a province or a state in Afghanistan which is still there. And so this Mahmud had established himself as the king of that state, Ghazna. And once he established himself there, then he engaged in invading India. And at that time, this was quite common, these invasions and coming and going. If you did not invade someone, they would invade you, that type of a system. So you had to keep, or he had to keep his kingdom, strong. He's a very controversial person, as I said. Some, people in India, especially the Muslims, particularly the Muslim people in India, they believe that he was a great person who brought Islam to India. Seen from the Hindu point of view in India, they say, no, he was a looter, he was a robber, who came to India and he robbed, us. He took all this wealth and jewelry from us, the Indian people, and took it to his court at Ghazna, and he glorified himself and his kingdom. And so that was like a very unethical or immoral thing to do. And he killed a lot of people also, in these invasions as it happens. So he's a very controversial person, liked by the Muslim and disliked or hated by the Hindus, Mahmud Ghazna. Although he was a son of Afghanistan, so if you ask an Afghani person, they would of course stand by him and sort of get inspiration from Mahmud of Ghazna or his rise and leadership. So after Mahmud Ghazna, you see this establishment of Islam in northwestern part of India, especially present-day Pakistan and other western areas of India. Let's see. After Mahmud of Ghazna, you also see what is called the slave dynasty. Most of these kings, they owned slaves, but don't confuse these slaves with the American slaves, the African American slaves that existed here in the United States. These were slaves, but much more owners of the dynasty. These were great commanders in the dynasty's armies. These were great politicians, and their dynasty is called a slave dynasty. But these slaves, they ruled India from about 1200 to 1500. So that's why it's a little bit misnomer to be called that these were the slaves, but these were the rulers. Some of them, they were very they were freed. They were given their freedom by their kings that owned them. And believe it or not, some kings even gave their daughters and sisters to these slaves. Why? Because these were very, able or talented people, of the time, militarily, politically, economically. They were very talented people. So think of a master who would give his wife, not his wife, but his daughter or sister in marriage to a slave. Why he would do that? Well, because he needed the help of slave, and in fact the future of the king's family was dependent upon the services of the slaves. So that's why they married their daughters and sisters to the slaves. So this is sort of a misnomer, but they kept the name slave just to show respect and reverence to or for their previous masters that owned them. So that's how the slave dynasty comes into being, and they created their own sultanate or their own rule that they ruled from Delhi in India. So it's a very interesting period, Muslim rule, but at the same time Turkish and Afghan, by ethnicity and race. It was this one that created the first female ruler of India and the Muslim world. The first female ruler came out of this slave dynasty. Very strong person. The only person, in fact, whose forces could not be defeated even by Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan tried. He went to India to defeat these forces and take over northwestern India and especially Delhi, but he failed thanks to her great leadership. But again, since she was a female and not many people accepted her, as a ruler, she was assassinated, by her own kinsmen, especially her own brothers. So this is a very interesting period in the history of India. Let's see further. Hinduism, which is and was the predominant religion of India. It's also within India and by the Hindu people refer to Hinduism as Sanatana Dharma, which literally means everlasting law, or for that reason religion or religious law. Sanatana Dharma, that is sort of a common name for Hinduism in India, but in English we call it Hinduism. And it, if you ask a Hindu scholar, what is Hinduism, they would say it's monotheism. But in fact, it has its own trinity of gods, which is referred to as Trimurti. Trimurti means the trinity of gods, three gods that it has, Hinduism, but they still believe this is monotheism. And those three gods are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So these are the three major gods in Hinduism. And each one has different several aspects, or called the avatars or reincarnations of these gods in different aspects and different people. Even Buddha is one of them. So for that reason, it's difficult to say whether this is Buddhism, monotheism or polytheism. If you ask the Hindu leaders, they insist, this is still monotheism, because everything emanates from Brahma, this one God, the supreme deity. Everything comes from him, and the rest are just avatars or aspects of him. So don't be misled. This is still, monotheism. And if you ask non-Hindu scholars of religion, they would say, it's all polytheism, how you can have these different gods and goddesses and yet you can call it monotheism. So there is that controversial. So I have a very simple way of looking at things. Always look at things from the believer's point of view. So don't judge Christianity from the Jewish point of view, or don't judge Judaism from the Hindu point of view, and vice versa. Look at from the believer's point of view, and whatever makes sense to them, that is what it is, basically. And so that's how peace would hopefully prevail, and don't get into too many problems over here. Whatever religion that may be. Okay, let's move on. The Sanatana Dharma, the everlasting law or religion of Hinduism, it has its own sacred books called the Vedas. And the Veda, Sanskrit term, it literally means wisdom or vision, the Vedas. And of course, when you read these Vedas, these sacred books, you will get wisdom and vision, not only just about Hinduism, the religion, but also the society, as well as the life itself. So hence the Vedas, literally meaning wisdom or vision. In Hinduism, there is a very strong emphasis on obeying one's Hindu caste laws. So whatever caste you are born, whatever caste you are born, that is your, fate, or that is your future, and you are born in it, and so you would have to follow the laws of that particular caste. And you cannot change your caste anyway. In lifetime, you have to die to change your caste. So after death, you would be reborn, of course, according to the Hindu philosophy or Hindu religion. You would be reborn, and we would see how you would be reborn in that cycle that we talk about. So keep in mind, the caste system itself, this really defined, and still it does, it defines Hinduism. But thanks to the Mahatma Gandhi, the great leader of India, when India was given freedom by the British, when it attained independence from the British, in the first free constitution, the first constitution of free India, that was framed around 1952, 1953, or went into effect at that time. That constitution, the head of the constitution making committee was a person, untouchable person, the leader of the untouchables, the lowest caste in India. And Gandhi elected that person to be the head of the constitution making committee. And so when he framed the constitution, with the help of, later on, Gandhi by that time was, he was assassinated in 1948. He was not around, but the spirit of Gandhi was around. And so he consulted other great Indian National Congress leaders, and they agreed that we must finish the caste system. It is a religious discrimination. It is a religious segregation. We must finish it. We must abolish it. So the first constitution of India that went into effect around 1952 abolished caste system. So it is against the law to observe the caste system. Especially it is against the Indian constitution to discriminate any person in terms of, especially in terms of employment or other economic opportunities, to discriminate people on the basis of their caste or creed, or color. So in a way, the Indian Constitution is the first constitution to pinpoint this problem of discrimination and finish it, end it, and termed it as illegal. So that's, I believe, a great achievement on part of the those people who framed the Constitution of India. Unfortunately, still, even this day, in the interior of India, that is the villages of India, unfortunately, people still practice it. And, I'm not the one to judge them, but if you ask them, it's part of their religion. So, and there are a growing number of Hindus. They believe you don't have to be practicing the caste system to be a Hindu person. So there is that type of liberal people in India that do not discriminate on the basis of caste system, and they don't care for the caste system, and yet they are Hindus, religious people. So here, in the original schemes of Hinduism, one had to obey the caste laws in which he was born, and especially one must not go beside the caste or above, out of caste, otherwise you would be out of caste or outcast. Now, another major theme in Hinduism is the breaking of samsara, or the cycle of birth and death. The belief is that we are all, engaged in this eternally program to be born and then die and reborn and then re-die and reborn and re-die. So this is, the cycle is called the birth and death of, the cycle of birth and death is called samsara. And so this is the great mission, or sort of, in a way, like purpose of life, especially for the soul, to break this cycle and get out of this birth and rebirth business. And then this personal soul that each individual has, that personal soul, individual soul, connects itself with Brahma, the great soul, the universal soul. And when that is achieved, then the next thing is a person is saved. And that salvation is called moksha in the Hindu terminology. Moksha means salvation. A person is saved once his or her individual soul, Atman, is connected to the universal soul, Brahman. And so the union of the personal soul with the universal soul is called moksha and salvation, after which the person would live in eternal bliss or blissful condition. He would not or she would not be born or would not die again. And so there is a sort of, eternal life after once this cycle is broken. And how that would happen? Well, it would happen if a person obeyed the caste laws in which he was born or she was born. So they obeyed the caste law. Next time they would be born in a higher caste. That's the good reward, for obeying the caste laws. Then another generation, or I don't know how many years it would take for a person to be reborn in a higher caste, and finally, the person would break the whole cycle of birth and rebirth, and would connect to the universal God or Brahma, universal soul. So that because of that universal soul, Brahma, Hindus believe that this is the original one God that they believe in, and because of that, it is monotheism. That's their belief. Okay, let's move on. Further, Hinduism, as I said, a predominant religion in India, and then Buddhism is the next one, the next major religion in India. Buddhism, although this religion would, get out of India into some other places. Let's see. Gautama Buddha or Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, born, about 500 years before Christ. He was born, and this person, he was a Hindu. He was a Hindu, and he, he was a son of a Hindu ruler in northern India, somewhere on the border between modern day India and Nepal. And so this great prince, he was Hindu once, as he was, waking up or coming into conscious or growing up and becoming an adult, he realized that something was not right. The way he was being raised, something was not right. So he wanted to get out of that lifestyle and discover for himself what was there outside in the world, because he had been protected from every type of, mishap by his father, who was, the ruler of the kingdom, as I said, on the border of India and Nepal. And what it was, somebody had told, a great saint of the day had told his father that your son, it looks like, either he would become a great religious leader or a sadhu, that is a sort of, a person who would renounce the whole world, and the king wanted to make sure that he would not do this. Neither he would renounce the world, nor he would become a great religious leader. He should rather be the son, the follower or the successor of his father, and stay in the kingdom and rule the kingdom after his father. So that was the whole arrangement. So that's why he was cocooned and very much protected from outside influences. But one day, he got out and saw different things, a dying person, a sick person, an old person, and he came to know that this is what happens to humanity. They die, they become sick, and they grow old. And so he realized, wow, this life is not really worth, all this fuss and all this rule, and there should be something else. So then he started his quest for bodhi, or attainment of this great vision or enlightenment that he received. Let's see what he wanted to achieve. He wanted people to be focused on the Four Noble Truths, and the first being, like, life is suffering. Jivan dukkha hai, that this whole life is suffering because we desire too many things and too often. And when we desire so many things, then we work so hard, and that's how we get into problems. And so what we should do is we should decrease and end our desires. And the less we have the desires, the better we would have our life. So we would not desire so much, and that's why we would not work and exhaust ourselves, in doing so much, which is, of course, the present day reality. Everybody wants a BMW or, a nice car, and well, they have to work for it. If you want to live in a beautiful home, get beautiful, good car, you have to work for it. So he came to realize that all this life is spent in desiring things and then in the fulfillment of those desires, and that's why we are suffering, because there is too much materialism around us, and so we need to get out of it. And so how you do? Well, stop desiring things, stay simple, eat simple stuff, live simple life, and you would be fine. Beside the Four Noble Truths, he also emphasized what is called the Noble Eightfold Path, in which he said that people should, and it emphasizes the right thinking, right use of language, and doing right deeds. So if you boil down the Noble Eightfold Path, it comes to thinking, language, and deeds. So if you were to think rightly. If you were to imagine right things, not evil things or bad things. Or if you were to use, language, use the right type of language, do not hurt other people, and of course do right deeds, not bad deeds. So that's the Noble Eightfold Path. Also, he insisted that people should abstain from, like any other religion would tell you, from killing, just like Bible says in the, in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. People should stay away from stealing, from lying, adultery, and intoxication. So these were, 4, 5, or 6. These were like major sins, and people should stay away from them. And this is something like almost any religion would tell you, don't do these things. Wherever people are, whatever religion they follow. Buddha said these things 500 years before Christ. That people should not be stealing, people should not be killing each other, or lying to each other, or engaging, in unlawful sexual activities or intoxication. So based on that, people should live a simple life, a life of truthfulness, a life of simplicity, that would not, force a person to lie to other people, or would force a person to take somebody else, property, stealing. So that's how, people should live in peace and harmony, and that's how Buddhism is characterized by peace and harmony, if you ask me, and that's the essence of Buddhism. Let's see further. Also, Islam, another major religion in India, as we're talking about India, but Islam came to India from outside, from modern day Middle East or Arabia or Saudi Arabia. It started with a person which is believed to be the prophet of Islam, Muhammad, and as Muslim would say, peace be upon him. Muhammad, a 570 AD person, born in 570, and he died in 632 AD. He was born in Mecca and he died in Medina. He claimed to be a prophet, and he said that a revelation was given to him, and that divine revelation is contained in the holy book of Islam called the Quran. Some people write it Quran, and some people write it as Koran. So either is fine, Koran or Quran, either spelling is fine, but I use the standard one, which is the Quran. That's the standard spelling. More and more people now use it. So Islam based on Quran and whatever Muhammad said or taught people. It emphasizes socioeconomic justice, kindness to people, generosity to people, morality, and protection of the poor people, just like any other religion would teach you. Similarly here, but this religion emphasized much more socioeconomic justice, kindness, generosity, morality, protecting of the poor people, especially in the Middle Eastern context, and which is now a universal religion, or maybe some people say the first universal religion. Monotheism, a big theme in Islam, the unity or the oneness of God. There is no other God except Allah, and Allah in Arabic, which means God, the same God of Moses, of Abraham, and Christ. So in that way, in this monotheism, it connects itself with the previous two religions of Abrahamic religion, as they're called, that is Christianity and Judaism. So monotheism is a big theme in Islam. If a person does not believe in that one God, Allah, or in the oneness of God, he or she is out of Islam. So, and it is, if any person associates, any other God with this one God, then he or she is committing a major sin in Islam, which is unforgivable sin. It's called shirk. Also, Islam believes, or Muslims are people who follow Islam. Islam is the name of the religion. They also believe in the day of judgment, that finally God would call everybody to account for their deeds. So good deeds would be rewarded and bad deeds would be punished. So that's sort of a, the day of judgment or accounting. Muslims also, they pray a lot of prayers, 5 times a day they pray, fasting, charity, pilgrimage to Mecca and also to Medina if one can. So these are the major practices in Islam. So what Islam would be characterized, it would be again the same emphasis on socioeconomic justice, generosity, kindness to people, also a very personal type of Islam, which is characterized again by prayers and fasting. And the more you give to other people, the more God would give you in reward or in return. If not here in this world, right now and right here, definitely in the next world, that starts with after death. There is life after death, that is belief, Muslims believe in it. So then God would reward you there. So that's how, there is sort of reward and punishment in Islam. Don't do any bad thing to other people. Leave it to God. He would deal with them. You should not be doing any bad things to any person. So that's how Islam is, it keeps its own peace in the society or in the community. Which is, as I said, Islam, a major religion of India, because we are talking about in the context of India. Let's see. Getting out of India, going into China, boy, that's a speed of like 100 years per second or minute maybe. The geography of China. Let's see that. Easily, China is divided into north and south. Northern part of China and southern part of China, and the north producing wheat, the south producing rice. The Yellow and the Yangtze rivers that characterize, the great bumper crops and geography of China right there. The northern one, this one is the Yangtze River, and this one is the Yellow River right here. And it's called the Yellow River because of this area, desert area, that brings its yellow dust into it, and it flows into the Yellow Sea right there. And this one is the Yangtze River, and both they start in Tibetan Plateau and go and they empty themselves in eastern China. So both major rivers producing bumper crops for the Chinese people, north and south. Very early on, from about 1600 to about 1050 BC, you see the rise of what is called the Shang dynasty, which was basically a late Neolithic culture. But even during that period of late Neolithic culture, It was, a period of kings, great armies, and public works. It looks like the Shang dynasty, as now more and more scholars want us to think about it. The Shang dynasty was not really the first dynasty. There was another dynasty before that, which is referred to as the Xia dynasty, the XIA, that's how it's spelled, XIA, the Xia dynasty. So the Shang dynasty was a continuation of a previous dynasty. That is the reason the Shang dynasty had very powerful kings, it had powerful armies, characterized by conquest and all that, and also public works, road construction, building construction during the Shang dynasty, as well as, pottery, the use of pottery for surplus food. So that's the Shang dynasty, very early on 1600, but still, powerful dynasty. It was during this period that you see the making of the oracle bones, and because of that, the rise of the Chinese script and the Chinese writing, the character. Oracle bones, if a king wanted to do something, he would consult the divine, the gods or the spirits, and so he would write questions, should I do this or should I not do this? Then these bones were heated up and cracks were created, and so the cracks would show the way to the king whether he should or should not do a certain activity. To be followed by a real great dynasty, the Zhao dynasty. Huge and big time period, more about 800 years. Think about it. Can anybody rule 800 years? And this dynasty did, which also tells us, the strength of this dynasty, the magnificence of this dynasty, and the material culture that it developed in China. The Zhou dynasty, very powerful dynasty, full of peace, full of prosperity, that sort of dynasty. It was at the end of the Zhou dynasty that the provinces, that is the states, they grew more in power at the expense of the central authority. So the Zhou dynasty, the end, coming closer to 221 BC, it was full of problems. More and more provinces or the state had gained a lot of power at the expense of the central king or the central authority, and so those problems, they started fighting among themselves, and hence the big problem that they created for China. Let's see further. Chinese philosophies. Confucianism, a major philosophy in China, emphasizing the strength of the family and the mandate of heaven, in which it teaches the rulers how to behave. Taoism, the way of nature. It believes that nature has healing powers, and we should be living in the peace and the quiet, or the simplicity and the beauty and the innocence of nature, and that's how we should live. So, to get rid of the problems, that's what we should do. The next one is legalism, another major philosophy, which was like legalism. It should mean like the rule of law, but in this sense, these laws were very strict laws. They were made to control people, and these laws were backed up by very harsh punishment. So legalism was not something like a very positive thing. It was a negative philosophy, much more to control, and a strong philosophy to control people. So Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism, that we talked at length, in their own time when we talked about the Chinese philosophies. Let's see further. Still staying in China, the Qin dynasty, very legalist dynasty. A unified China, a major theme in the history of China unification, built the Great Wall of China to protect China from the Mongols. To be followed, this Qin dynasty was short-lived dynasty because it did rather too much in too little period, small period, and people became sick and tired of them, and hence the overthrow of the Qin dynasty. To be followed by the Han dynasty, a major dynasty. It increased agriculture. It also abolished the Qin dynastic oppression, and started what's called the Silk Road trade between China as well as the West, Central Asia, Arabia, and even with Rome. Now, keep in mind, It is from the name of the Qin dynasty that we get the European name for China, for that country as China. So the Qin name is given to the land and the country. The Han name, H-A-N, that name is given to the people of China. So real Chinese, till this day, they call themselves Han Chinese. There are other Chinese, different, ethnic groups, but they would be considered as non-Han Chinese. So Han Chinese being the real Chinese people, and it is from the name of this Han dynasty that we get the name of the people, and from the Qin dynasty we get the name of the country. Okay, after the Han dynasty, which was a long rule, 400 years, we get again into trouble. The post-Han period, again, a lot of political divisions and disintegration in China. Again, somebody would come and save China. And let's see that. That would be under what is called the Golden Age of China, under the Sui dynasty as well as the Tang dynasty. These two dynasties, like ruling forever, or the collective period, somewhere around, 300 years or 400 years, that is called the Golden Age of China, during which they ended the internal disintegration of China, unified China, focused on the development of national economy. Previously, much more the economy of China was regional, but under these two dynasties, it became much more national economy and national agriculture and commerce. It was also during this period that rice started being grown in the north, which was good for the northern people because they always were stuck up with wheat. The Song dynasty, also a major dynasty that continued the golden age going on, but unfortunately, as in the history of China, at the end of every great period, positive period, full of production, full of peace and prosperity, unfortunately something goes wrong in the history of China, either internally or externally. So if not internally, in this case externally, somebody came and ruined all that peace and prosperity that lived in China for hundreds and hundreds of years. And let's see what happened to China from outside, close to 1279. Okay, let's see. That is the rise of the Mongol Empire that wiped out so many other empires, especially under the great leadership of Genghis Khan. Don't confuse him with me. He doesn't look like me. Okay, although we share the same last name, but no relation. Genghis Khan, he unified the Mongol tribes and turned them into a very formidable, ferocious force. He conquered most of Central Asia and, showed the way to his sons and grandsons how to make empire. And they would, bring other places and would establish what's called the Mongol Empire. Why? It started with Genghis Khan, but as I said, his sons and grandsons would continue and bring other places under their control, and that would be like Hulagu Khan, who ruled between 1256 to 1265, and he conquered the present-day country of Iran and Iraq, Hulagu Khan. His other descendant, Kublai Khan, he conquered most of southern China and put an end to the Song dynasty, which was southern Song dynasty, and he proclaimed his own dynasty in China, Yuan dynasty, that ruled for quite some time in China. Also, he kept the Silk Road trade going. Kublai Khan and other Khans in the region under the Mongol Empire, they imposed sort of peace on people, and that peace in fact started was good for the trade and business between different people, and especially between China in the east and the Europeans in the west. And in between, anybody like the Afghanis or the Indians, the Persians or the Arabs, they could do the same, trade and business with the Chinese people. In fact, a lot of Arabs, they were the middlemen between China and Europe. Persians were the same, Afghani people were the same, or Central Asian people were the same people that would do business between China and the rest of the West. So thanks to the force or the peace that the Mongol had imposed upon different people. Okay, let's see. Japan. Getting out of China, going into Japan, land and people. As we said, geographically, these are isolated, islands. Japan, very isolated in the extreme east of East Asia, geographical isolated. The people of Japan, a mixed group of people of the Aborigines, the Ainu people, and the Koreans. So all these three different groups went into the making of the present day Japanese people. And also, it was in Japan that the Shinto religion was adopted as sort of a national religion. And between 7th and 9th century AD, of course, Chinese influences, overwhelmed Japan. So in the ancient history or the medieval history of Japan, Chinese influences were very strong. They adopted the Chinese script or the Chinese character to write Japanese language. They adopted Buddhism and Confucianism from China. Right. It was only in the 11th century Japan that Japan became Japan, and it developed its own political culture and got sort of rid of the Chinese influences. It was during this period, the 11th century and onward, that you see the rise of the shoguns, different shoguns ruling Japan. And because of the shogun, strong powers and authority, the emperors did not have that power and authority. So that's why, as the shoguns ruled, the emperors in Japan, they reigned. And that was because the shoguns ruled decreased powers of the reigning emperors. So the emperors, some of these were at the mercy of the shoguns, who controlled military power. Rise of the samurai military class, a major feature in the history of Japan. It happened in 11th century Japan. And because of the internal politics and changes and problems, these political changes in Japan reinforced the geographical isolation of Japan. So Japan geographically stayed isolated, but even internal political developments, leaders did not want to go out and reach out to other people. So politically isolated as well as geographically isolated. Let's see further. Coming out to Southeast Asia. As we know, Southeast Asia is divided into two major sections, mainland and island Southeast Asia. Both tropical paradises in Southeast Asia at large, a tropical paradise. Dominant Malay group existing in Southeast Asia and mixed up with other ethnic groups, but the Malay group is very dominant. Bumper crops, the paradise as we call it. The Indian and the Chinese cultural and religious influences very dominant in the lives of Southeast Asia. And not just only the Indian and the Chinese, Southeast Asia also attracted Middle Eastern and European influences, in which case the Middle Eastern people brought Islam and the European people, especially the Spanish, brought Christianity. So Southeast Asia, religiously, racially, ethnically, quite diversified, area. Let's see further. Asia. Wow, we're coming to review, sort of the end of Asia. It is the largest continent in area and in population. About 3.9 billion Asians, they're out of 6 billion world population. So think about it. The world population being 6 billion and the Asian being 3.9 billion. The first globalized continents, as it's called, produce all major world religions, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and leading technological powers as Asia is Japan, China, and India. These are, the major powers and continuously influencing the world. So I think we did a lot of stuff in today's presentation about Asia, and I really thank you for tuning in and, putting up with me. So I see you and talk to you again on the phone or contact you over the email. Thank you very much. Aloha.